The Knicks took another step towards going all in this offseason by getting Karl Anthony Towns. If we had to decide today if they got better, the answer is probably yes. And honestly, I think that for now, they probably benefit more from this trade. But I think if we look at their entire offseason, there's reasons to be a little concerned. Let's first talk about why I think this cat trade is good for them. If you want to skip to why I'm concerned, check the timestamps below. So, with Mitchell Robinson out for the first 3 months and Hartenstein gone, the Knicks point blank needed a center. Playing Randall at the 5 is just not it, because again, Randall doesn't have a defensive mindset. Having someone that's 6'8" at your center position that can't show consistent effort is just not going to cut it for today's NBA. You need centers that can protect the paint at the very least, but more ideally, affect multiple actions at one time. And I'm not saying that Cat's going to fill all of those defensive responsibilities, but he's at least a 7-foot big man that can space the floor and get you rebounds. What I really liked from the first preseason game is that they use Cat as a passing hub. The word hub is thrown around a lot. It just really means someone who they run offense through. I like that when Cat caught the ball in the post, they had cutters that Cat could choose to throw to. We didn't see that as much in Minnesota, partially because Gobert was there. So if someone tries to cut, they're just causing more traffic at the rim. In the last video, I had explained how the Ant and Cat pick and rolls didn't give the results that people thought it could bring. And the reason is that teams often put a forward on Cat instead of a center, meaning they could just switch the pick and roll. That would force Cat to beat them inside, and he's not the best at doing that. But with Cat at the 5 for the first 3 months, it's fair to assume that teams are probably going to put the center on Cat more often. That probably means we'll see less switching and then more drop coverage, so there's more potential for Cat and Brunson to be a good pick and roll duo. We saw a little bit of that in their first preseason game with the Hornets. With the center guarding Cat, it allows him to pick between going to the rim or the 3-point line. The Hornets did later put a forward on Cat and a center on Josh Hart, so they had Hart screening for Brunson while Cat was at the 3-point line. I think we'll see a lot of this, especially before Robinson gets back. Ideally though, New York is probably going to want to see Cat at the 4 and Mitchell Robinson at the 5. Similar with Gobert, Cat can work with them, especially because he's a lob threat. And because Cat's comfortable running pick and rolls as a ball handler to some extent, this duo has potential to be compatible together. So offensively, there's a lot of potential, and his presence fills a hole that New York really needs. Now defensively, because the Knicks are so thin at the 5, Cat is going to have to be much better at staying out of foul trouble. We saw this numerous times where he would continuously pick up silly fouls and then argue those calls in the process. So he has a huge responsibility to make sure that he can stay on the court so that the Knicks have a functional center to even work with. Right now, the Knicks are strong defensively on the perimeter, but have a few guys that teams can attack, especially Brunson and Towns together. Even in their first preseason game, Charlotte was able to generate pretty good offense when they were able to get to the rim. So guys like OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, and Bridges have their work cut out for them to navigate screens efficiently and contain dribble penetration. And that's just a small part of a bigger problem for the lack of a better term. If you're asking me if the Knicks have gotten better this offseason, the answer is yes. But the Knicks are going through a pretty significant identity change that I don't think should be ignored. You know, for the last 3 to 4 seasons, what had made them so special is that they're this scrappy, physical team that just bullies everyone. Was their roster perfect? Absolutely not. Besides Brunson and to some extent Randall and OG, no one on their roster was a reliable scoring option. But what New York did was grit and grind through games to win. Even going back and watching that Philly series, they did not have nearly the same offensive firepower that the Sixers had. But they were in control for a lot of that series because they just straight up bullied them. The rebound differential was crazy, and I don't think I've ever seen a series where a team just straight up won because they completely out-hustled the entire team. And it's not unsustainable either because this team is big, and their mentality was to be the toughest team on the court. What I think really sucks about the Knicks situation is that OG Anunoby and Mitchell Robinson are injury-prone players. Because if they weren't, I don't think they would feel the need to shell out 5 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges when he's a pretty similar player to OG. And if that doesn't happen, they probably could keep Isaiah Hartenstein, who, as crazy as it sounds, totally resemble what the Knicks were all about. This man was scrappy, the Knicks' best offensive rebounder, and could stay healthy. Personally, I would have loved this team if they had only made this cat trade and re-signed Hartenstein, But I understand that the Knicks felt like they needed an insurance policy for Anunoby given his injury history. Overall, what I do know is that this team is better on paper, but they lost a lot of toughness and physicality, which is what made them so uniquely great in the first place. What's also really unfortunate for New York is that they never got to see how good this team really was. With all the injuries that happened, they lost out on a chance to see how they would actually compete against Boston. If they had a chance to see how that series pans out, I think it would be easier to change the complexion of your team if you end up getting dominated. The only film they had was the regular season, but none of them had OG except the one that they won when Boston was already coasting through the regular season. The main concern that the Knicks had voiced was that they felt they needed to load up on wings to compete with the Celtics, but again, at what cost? Without a great offensive rebounder like Hartenstein, a big physical bully like Randall, and a scrappy guard DiVincenzo, we'll have to see if Tibbs can really bring that physical style to a team that's not necessarily as wired as their past teams. The Knicks likely weren't confident that they had enough offensive pieces to compete with better offensive teams like the Celtics and the Nuggets. What I did like about their offseason is that they found offensively minded guys who are trying to complement Jalen Brunson instead of trying to take over as the first scoring option. Bridges can create for himself at times, but he's much better playing off another ball handler. Cat also gives the Knicks range at the 4 and the 5 that they've never had, which gives them more offensive lineup flexibility. But what I do know is that the Knicks are probably still not better than the Celtics from an offensive standpoint. So while they have enough bodies to throw at Brown and Tatum, whether or not they can really bully the Celtics on the glass is going to be a huge factor in determining how close a potential Eastern Conference Finals looks. Now, if we're talking about just Cat, I think that trade will directly help New York right now. But to me, in general, it feels like they made these moves in spite of not knowing how far this team can really go. So I'm excited to see how this team looks, but I hope that they can continue to play with the identity that had made them so good the last 2 years. I won't be surprised if they start slow as they figure out what their strengths are, but if I had to guess, this team is going to be better offensively and struggle a little bit more defensively. So with all that said, they should still be the second best team in the Eastern Conference, but we're just going to have to find out if they can compete with the perennial contenders in the league right now. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. Besides that, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.